بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I just want to start this webinar by thanking Dr. Steffen. And Steffen Lehmann is well-known scholar. I learned this in the sustainability issues regarding cities, buildings, and he's well famous. And those information and feedbacks were given to me by specialists. When I started thinking about the topic, I read about his book, okay? And his book is the Reimagining the Library of the Future. Caught my attention. And so I searched about Dr. Lehmann, and I learned about him. I followed his research, and also I attended some of his work. So I took the chance and emailed him. And so we talked about, and I invited him for the webinar. When I invited him, it was so easy to deal with the real scholar and a real well-known people who gave their time for others. So he agreed to come and join us and give this webinar, which is free of charges. So he contributed his time, his scientific knowledge to the people. And this is the way we deal with when we work in voluntarily organizations, and when we ask real scholars to come and join us and support us in reaching out to a wide group of people. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Steffen Lehmann to accept my invitation. I'm grateful to Lehmann as a well-known scholar. I learned about him from reading about the book, from reading his CV, from following his activities and listening to some of the webinars he made. But I'm also got supported by special people who work in the architectural business and the city sustainability issues and organization, buildings, and those issues. So I heard very positive feedback about him. So we are honored to have you. And I'll just say that Dr. Steffen, he's the founder and the principal of SI Architecture and plus Urban Design, which was in Dubai and still, I think, in Dubai. He's a professor of architecture and urbanism, director of Urban Future Lab at the UNLV, University of Nevada, USA, professor of graduate school, KU University, Tokyo. The book who caught my attention and the reason that why I invited Dr. Steffen was the same of the famous book is Reimagining the Library of the Future. Now the library is living as all of the activities of the library, a time of a change. And also we see the issues that Dr. Steffen will talk about today is countries are interested in listening and also developing their plans according to the issues relating to sustainability, green buildings, and those issues, natural lighting, and those issues. So we'll have the chance to listen. But excuse me, Steffen will give John the minutes to talk, and we are honored to have John. And thank you, John, for coming so early and joining us. But this is the beginning. Inshallah, it will be. We will continue this communication and the relationship more and more, and hopefully to see you soon in our next conference. John, by the way, is the president of the Special Library Association in the United States. John, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Hassan, and thank you, Dr. Lehmann, for coming to speak with us today. Maraba and hello, everyone. My name is John DiGilio, and I am the 2024 president of the Special Libraries Association. I'm coming to you live this morning from Los Angeles, California. It is an honor to join you all today for this timely webinar. I want to express both congratulations to the SLA Arabian Gulf community for putting together this providential session, and my own gratitude for having been invited. As we come together to reimagine the library of the future, I am reminded that there has never been a more critical and yet exciting time to be part of the library and information industry. The dawn of artificial intelligence, for example, is just the latest and perhaps most auspicious evolutionary stage in this age of digital information. It is, however, also one of the most precarious. The power of information and technology to change the ways in which we work, live, communicate, and learn has never been greater. Neither, however, has the threat of the consequences of its misunderstanding and particularly its misuse. As librarians, information professionals, and technologists, we have a crucial role to play in guiding and shaping the ways in which the impact of this new technology is put to work for the good of human development and interaction. Your participation here today is a testament to that dedication and curiosity that are necessary to ensure that libraries of the future are on the forefront of the push to ensure that information, technology, and of course, today's topic, the facilities in which we house all of this, are used ethically, skillfully, and for the greater good of all people. So thank you for having me today and for all that you do as a community and as individuals on behalf of libraries and information professionals, and of course on behalf of the Special Libraries Association. You make us very proud. So I thank you, and Dr. Lehmann, this is your show today. We are honored to have you.
Thank you so much. If it's okay, I get started. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dr. John. Thank you, Professor Hassan. Thank you to the Special Library Association Arabic Gulf chapter for organizing today's webinar, and live from Las Vegas, not far from you, John. I'm glad you're all here. And again, if you're just logging in, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and thanks for joining us. I will speak around 55 minutes, and there will be some time to answer your questions. What brings us together is the sharing of an enthusiasm for libraries, and Dr. John mentioned already, alluded to this. We're all wondering, what about the library, the architecture of the libraries, and where is it going? And I'm an architect and have a passion for libraries for a very long time. And today I have the pleasure, the privilege to work with several libraries, head librarians in the US and in Europe on their new building designs, and hopefully doing more in the Arabic Gulf region in the future. My webinar will be in 3 parts. First, I will talk a little bit about the historical evolution of the public library and its evolving typology, which keeps still evolving as we speak. because this is such an important aspect, then I will talk about recent libraries and emerging design trends, and then looking ahead, what might be the characteristics of the next generation library. I just want to put in a plug. Professor Hassan Al-Seri mentioned already my book, Reimagining the Library, which is available. And there is not too much. If you look at the market, there are not too many books available. Strangely, there is a real knowledge gap. And so I'm very glad I was able to publish this book last year. And it's very popular. So some of the main questions that you will all know very well and move us is, what will the library of the future feel like? How does it engage its end users, but also what will be those design characteristics? And what we use as a methodology in our research is not only our own empirical observations by visiting libraries, which is very important always to do, but also studying the plans and sections and the functional organization of over 50 libraries, interviewing librarians, and also comparing the new libraries, having visited over 20 libraries recently that were built in the last 20 years, and using this to speculate forward into the future, looking at what could be those trends and what might be relevant. AI has already been mentioned, obviously a major game changer, artificial intelligence, machine learning, libraries, and how will this all come together for the good, a force of good, exploring this continuous evolution. What we find is people love original, authentic manuscripts. Here's one by William Shakespeare. It's already 400 years old, but you won't believe how popular it is for people to go to Oxford to study, for instance, this manuscript and see the handwriting on the paper and smell the paper. So people are, again, rediscovering the authentic document despite all the digitization. Of course, there's a perfect scan online that we can enjoy, but people want to see the real thing. It's not enough just to know it is online. And you will remember 20 years ago, prematurely, people proclaimed this is the end of the library is dying and everything will be digitized and we will not go to libraries anymore. How wrong have they been? Today we see some of the libraries are booming, and I'm going to talk about why are some of those libraries so popular and taking on new roles like community centers and social condensers, because libraries are for free and they attract a wide range of society, and they always will. And the opposite is the case. Libraries are more alive and booming than ever. So despite the internet, people love to see the real thing. We see the commodification of culture, but also we see people lining up to see the manuscript, the books. And if you know, if you have recently been to the Louvre in Paris, you know how crowded it is. People want to see the real thing, the Mona Lisa, even if there are fantastic scans online. We also should briefly mention the important work that has been done by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. Very important book, the Public Library Manifesto, that you all will know, from 1994, which was prepared together with the IFLA. It's online, which talks about what is the mission of the library, not-for-profit, permanent public institution in the service of society, open to the public, accessible and inclusive. We also see, I mentioned already, the new role of the library as a quasi-community center. And what's so funny to me, I'm at the age where I, of course, remember the time before the computer and now the rediscovery of the analog of our children that grew up with iPads and never used books. They always had everything online, and now they rediscover that there are some things like books where you can open and look at it and have the pages to turn and so on. So it's quite interesting. And for the older generation, us, it's funny to see how the young generation is discovering libraries. But why is it that some libraries are so popular? I would say my first hypothesis is that the spatial and functional design of a library is critical to attracting its users. And we have been to many libraries, all of us, and we've been to some that work very well and are very well designed and planned, and some that are less well designed. And this has a lot to do with the popularity, of course. And if you read the Fraggle report that is now already a couple of years old, came out 2018, it documented that there was a decline of a fall of the use of the public library by 31%. So some libraries are popular and some libraries are declining. But what is most common to libraries is there is a lot of pressure on the budget. Librarians know what I mean. They have to do more with less money, which is something we should pick up later again and discuss more. But it depends to a large degree on the mix of offerings and the functional design of those new spaces. So let's have a quick look at, in part one, at the historical evolution, past, present, and future, how libraries have moved out from previously isolated private places like in palaces, private collections, monasteries, and how they became public in the late 18th century. And of course, how the typology of the public library, it's constantly evolving as a freestanding building. It wasn't always like that. Freestanding buildings didn't exist as for a library at the beginning. They were part of the museum in the Greeks. And of course, there is a constant debate about how much reading room, how much book storage areas should a library have. So those kind of questions we should pick up later in the webinar. The first library we know about was the Library of Ashurbanipal, which is today located in present-day North Iraq. And it had a huge amount of clay tablets, and it told us about the ancient Mesopotamian civilization. So we know a lot about what this library used to be, but also the great library of Alexandria, which was, as I mentioned, not a freestanding building. It was part of the museum, the Greek word for museum, and it was founded around 300 before Christ, and it had over 40,000 papyrus rolls and documents. It was the intellectual center with scholars like Euclid and Archimedes studying there. Another important library is, of course, the Library of Celsus in today Turkey located. You can still see the ruin of the library, which was in fact, again, not a freestanding building of library. It was the museum. And what is special, the scholars traveled a long way to get there, to study there, and they could eat and sleep. It was a kind of a hotel, a library as a hotel where scholars could stay. And there was, of course, the great library of Alexandria, Pergamum, and the third one was Celsus. And they were celebrated, and scholars all over the world came there. Now, what's so interesting is if we look at the plans of those libraries, early libraries, and the museum, they always had the stoa. The stoa was a protected public space for free speech and dialogue, and it was the entry into the library. So you had the entry, a public arcade as a public walkway before you would enter the museum, and one part of the museum would then be the library. And we can see in this wonderful painting by da Messina from 1445, Saint Jerome in his study, very famous painting that shows us how many books a scholar had at that time. Here, the collection of Saint Jerome consisted of around 25 volumes in his private collection, and it was combined with other artifacts, not just books, but it was all about keeping those items of great rarity protected. And it also encapsulates the core problem of the library and the solution of library design, which means bring the books close to the user, to the reader. So how do you manage to have a close relationship between the scholar and the book? Some question that has dominated library planning throughout history. We see also around the same time, in 1455, the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg, which made a huge change because suddenly a huge amount of books was available and the number of books was rapidly growing. All librarians know about suffering the constant growth of the collection, where to put all those new books. Every year you would have thousands, tens of thousands of new books you would buy, and where do you put all those physical books? So that's a big question we will visit again later in this webinar. Around this time, a little bit later, we see the Laurentian Library, very important library by Michelangelo, and it shows us a private collection by the Medici family. And the Medici family was very keen to show that they are not just merchants making money, but they were also intellectuals and cultivated. And they had this private library, very interesting solution with the books were kept in desks. You see the timber desks, and you see a very narrow, long room. In fact, 46-meter long reading room, accessed with a vestibule. You see in the plan, it was part of the cloister, the monastery San Lorenzo. The yellow part is the library. And you see here the entry space into the library, which is very, very famous between architects. And you see how the Medici invested in a building to express that we are members of an educated society. Other libraries which are very important at that time, I just will run through a couple of them. Again, within an abbey, Maria Laach, part of a monastery, not yet an independent building, but part of a monastery founded in 1093. And we see that only in the 1700s, the typology of the library as an independent, free-standing building emerged. Just on a side gig here, you know that Umberto Eco's beautiful book, The Name of the Rose, writes about the secret library as a labyrinth hidden in a secluded abbey, only accessible to a few in a kind of Pyrenean space that was later copied by Harry Potter. You have all seen the movies. So the private collection was not accessible to everybody at that time, but were restricted and accessible to a few, and collections of books, we find them in palaces, in the homes of aristocrats, monasteries, and of course, the universities, the university library, and its own role as a typology. It's a very important ancient typology too. We will look at that in a moment. And it was established around 1789. That was the public library as part of the French Revolution, with the idea of knowledge and education for all, a principle of equality, not equity, but equality, which spread very fast in Europe. And around the 1820s, 30s, in many cities, they started to build public libraries. And why 1785? Very important, French Revolution also, but this is the day of the date of Etienne Louis Boulet's proposal for a public library as a gigantic forum, the Bibliothèque Nationale, his architectural design for the French National Library, which was never built, but was incredibly important. It was much published already at that time with a neoclassical Enlightenment, monumental scale proposal with a big barrel vault. And the special thing about this library was it had open bookcases, open and easily accessible. The first time you see the center of the library, in fact, is empty. It's an empty void. And you see left and right the endless long bookcases, very much in contrast to the medieval system we saw previously. You see now a totally different kind of space that Boulet called the amphitheater of books. And it was a very remarkable design. Still, architects today are stunned by it and talking about it, like here, well-known Max Dudler, architect colleague in Berlin, who says, the role of the library in modern society is embedded in Boulet's design. No other design encapsulates this idea more. And he says, the public square surrounded by the book is a forum. And he says, Boulet's library is therefore a public space par excellence. We see some other examples, very interesting. I just want to mention the Biblioteca Palafoxiana in Mexico was the first public library in the Americas already in 1646, a private small library donated by the Bishop Palafox. He donated his private collection to the seminary, again, in the monastery, to the collegio, but it was available to anyone who could read, and not just to the academics or the monks. That was quite interesting early. So we see many beautiful libraries. Many of you will have visited, and you know them from images. Here's a very important one in Görlitz, again in Germany. Very special because it's one of the earliest that did not just collect any book, but it had a special library dedicated to natural sciences and geography, maps, and some other historical significant libraries. Trinity Library in Dublin, which was part of the university, built in 1712, and it's a very interesting plan. Let's look at this in a second. Very famous, very important library in Dublin. And you see here the long room, 65-meter long, even longer than the one we saw before by Michelangelo. And where are the books? The books are left and right in alcoves along the daylight, where the natural light comes in. This is where the books are stored, and there are also tables and chairs left and right in those alcoves where you can go and sit down and read the book, enjoy the daylight. And in the center, it is a void and it's open for circulation. Very interesting. So we see a lot of new typologies of libraries emerging. There's, of course, Jean-Nicolas Louis Durand's famous library typology, which is more in the spirit of the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, published in Le Brésil in 1802. Library that is all about beauty, proportion, symmetry, and functional performance around courtyards, 4 courtyards. Looks still like a palace. And then a very big change happens in 1816. Leopoldo della Santa is publishing the ideal library plan, and he says the library should be divided in 3 categories. He has, in fact, a central reading room, then he has narrow magazines, cabinets, left and right, book stacks, and smaller rooms for the administration. And this made a real change. This was very fundamental, picked up by many, like Le Brousse, the famous French library architect. He then built libraries based on de la Santa's plan with a strict separation. The first time we see the strict separation between the magazine, the book storage, you see here in yellow, and the reading room in blue, which had a lot of daylight through 4 courtyards, but also the administrative rooms in pink. And this was the reason why De La Santa promoted the separation. He said, we constantly have a growing collection, so we need to deal with the collection separately, and there's also a fire hazard which we have to solve. It was the case that several library collections burned down, and there was a strong case for separating, in terms of fire, the magazine and storage of the books separate away from the reading room. Now that made a big change, because before we saw that close relationship between the reader in the reading room surrounded by books. Suddenly in the reading room, you couldn't see any books anymore. And that was quite a move. And that was picked up, as I said, by Le Brousse, Henri Le Brousse's Bibliothèque Saint-Geneviève in Paris, very famous corner milestone in library design in 1851. And again, a lot of innovation, not just the whole construction, which was iron cast columns, very slender, lightweight. Suddenly there was a column-free space, but also users were sitting on long tables and benches for reading. You see the long tables that they shared, also in the engraving in the middle, and you see very beautifully how the users would sit together at those long tables and how the books would be separate but visible, still visible from the readers on the left and the right, picking up on De La Santa's proposal. Very interesting library that was then emanated and copied by many, many architects later. We also see other wonderful libraries like the Portuguese cabinet, reading cabinet in Rio de Janeiro. Of course, Brazil became independent in 1822, and it had a huge collection of 400 volumes stored in this three-level library designed in 1837. Very important library, the Bodleian libraries, not just one building, but a series of buildings, today in 5 buildings. Very well-known library, very historical, important library that was founded with the university in the 13th century. It's the oldest university in England. Cambridge is a little bit less old, as you know, but the group of 5 buildings, all different. One is the Radcliffe Camera, which we see here in the middle, a circular building put as an object in a courtyard. And we see that there was a new way to store books. One of the innovations, there were many innovations for the libraries developed over the years, but one was to store the books not on their ends, on the shelves, but rather previously books were always stacked horizontal, but now books were stacked vertical, which allowed more books to fit in smaller space, more books on shelf, but also made them more easily accessible. So the book storage was turned 90 degrees, an innovation that happened in Oxford and picked up in many universities, of course, everywhere today, worldwide. We also see the circular reading room in the British Museum, very important, by Smirk, Rotunda, inspired by the Pantheon, a space-saving circular arrangement that was picked up later in Stockholm, as we will see, by Asplund. Very important library that unfortunately is not accessible today, but numerous famous people worked in that library on those benches, on those chairs. Mark Twain, Virginia Woolf, George Orwell, Oscar Wilde. It is also said that Sun Yat-sen, Vladimir Lenin, and Karl Marx, he wrote Das Kapital there, apparently, in this library. Very important history. And now we see what happens is the private society, the book collections of not only the aristocrats, but the citizens that the upper class that become educated and have a growing library at home in their houses. Here is an image, a painting from Alexander von Humboldt, and he's sitting in his library, in his study in Berlin. And of course, he was very well-known Prussian geographer, explorer, and he had published himself 36 books, but he also had a collection of over 11,000 books. And you see how he surrounded himself of a specific particular collection, his travel diaries, but also books by others that he used on a daily basis when he spent time in his house. Now we see the educated upper class starting to collect books and creating their own libraries, which is quite a significant move in the history and evolution of libraries. We also see some examples of the great 19th century libraries. I'm thinking about those significant libraries that played such an important role in this ancient typology, like in Baltimore, Boston, New York, Berkeley, Connecticut, New Haven. We were going to look at those. And Andrew Carnegie and his role as a philanthropist. Andrew Carnegie was an industrialist, and he gave back a lot of money, and he donated part of his fortune to build 1,689 libraries across the United States, which is significant. They were called the Carnegie Libraries. They had all a formula, how they were arranged architecturally, and they were equipped with the same shelving system, the same table system, modular tables, and libraries became in all those small towns that otherwise would not have had a library if it wouldn't have been to the donation of Carnegie. This community anchor that many Americans grew up in the 19th, 20th century with a library at in their towns, in their small towns. It was not only a luxury of the elites. The Carnegie formula allowed the library to come to all those small towns and cities in the United States. I mentioned Baltimore, very famous library, and we see here a very interesting typology, a central void, an atrium in the middle, and on several floors, here 5 stories, the library arranged around the central skylit atrium with light from the top. Very interesting typology that Louis Kahn picked up later. Boston Public Library, very important. And you see also what is here very similar to the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève we saw earlier in Paris, 1851. Now, 45 years later in Boston, McKim, Mead, and White building this important library, very similar. Scholars sit along long tables and the windows are on the sides. We have bookcases along the walls, but we see the windows are above and we have no view to the outside, but we have daylight entering from the high windows above the bookcases. In this way, the daylight, the UV light would not damage the books. The books would be shaded because the daylight enters above, but you would have the daylight coming to the pages where you would sit at a table. Very interesting arrangement, I must say, in section, architecturally, very important innovation at that time that we see in many other libraries, also here in New York City, a little bit later. Again, same architects, McKim, Mead, and White, using this model for New York City Public Library, the largest public library system in the world. We see also, different from the museum, the art gallery or the theater or the library is the most public buildings of all public buildings. One of the reasons why I love the library so much is that the library will always be free and it will always offer its services for all. It's a truly inclusive typology and it is different. The art gallery might charge you money. The theater, the museum, we will have to pay to listen to a concert or see a piece of theater. The library is always for free. So it is, my hypothesis too is the library is the most public buildings of all public buildings. Let's quickly look at a couple of 20th centuries examples, 5 examples I picked. The Stockholm Library, already mentioned. Again, a circular arrangement in plan, a drum in the center surrounded by a U-shaped frame inspired by Ledoux, we saw earlier, the neoclassical architect. And this library has a circular book wall. Very, very interesting how the books are arranged all around you and you are surrounded by books. You enter the library from underneath, you come up a stair in the center of the circle, and then you stand in the middle. This was the first public library in Sweden that applied open shelving. What happened is Asplund, the architect, Erik Gunnar Asplund, traveled to the US and he saw all those new library designs. He returned back to Sweden and then he said, let's do the American system of the open accessible shelving. And you don't have to ask anybody. You just go around and stroll. You walk around and you can pull out any book at any time. Something that was very much led an impression on Asplund, and he used it here in the first time in Sweden for Stockholm Library. We see a couple of more images of this important library, how you enter, how you come up, you enter the space, and how you get daylight very high in the drum, but also this beautiful, remarkable space that we have from the outside, architectural, also very, very interesting, situated in a public park. The second important library I want to mention is also in Scandinavia. It was designed by Alvar Aalto. Now here we have modernism, modern architecture as something groundbreaking, new, with its intellectual approach and a new vision for architecture. And here we see in 1927 the design of the first modern library, Viborg Library. Today it's called Viipuri City Library. It's located in Russia because the border between Finland and Russia changed. But here we see some very interesting innovation in library design. One is the treatment of the ceiling. It is not the wall, but the ceiling where the light comes in straight down on the page, on the paper, and it is diffuse. It is not direct UV light. We also see the sunken bookwell. Let's look at this more. We see here, it's a very, very important example for functionalism, functional modernism. And you see the circulation desk is located in the center for easy supervision, but you also see the way it is arranged with those 55 conical skylights that provide soft, diffuse, controlled daylight. No glare, no direct UV light, but again, strict control of daylighting, avoiding direct sunlight. And Aalto always said, I want the experience of reading a book to be as if it was done outdoors, sitting underneath a tree. His idea was you sit in a garden underneath a tree and you read a book. The ideal moment we all appreciate. And he wanted this to be the feeling that people had when they were coming to his library. And here in section, you see very clearly the sunken reading well. You see in the photo below, invention of Aalto, but also the perforated ceiling with this regular perforation of circular skylights. Many opportunities for visitors to sit in different locations to enjoy reading. Another very important 20th century library I picked out of the 5 I want to talk about is Beinecke Rare Books Manuscript Library by SOM. It's located at Yale University. It's very interesting. You enter at the ground floor over a new plaza. The architect not only designed the library, but the whole surrounding, the context, which is ideal here, a new plaza, underground plaza, but also the whole library is contained in a floating box, which is a cube, and it sits on only 4 pillars, pilotis. The whole box is the big concrete frame, and you see when you enter the library at the bottom, and then you go up and you see that the whole wall of the windowless monolithic floating cube, very abstract, is actually made in thin translucent marble stone. So there is a very interesting filtering of daylight, very controlled. And inside this monumental cube is another cube of glass. And this glass is climatically controlled, where you have 180,000 volumes, including, for instance, a Gutenberg Bible is in this collection. So these are the rare, very precious books and manuscripts, and they are in a secondary container in a 6-story tower of steel and glass that you can enter at control points. And inside this is a climatically controlled, constant, same indoor temperature to make sure those books are not getting damaged. So this is a very, very famous library, I must say, an amazing solution, but it has limits. It cannot grow. One of the problems of this wonderful library in Yale University in New Haven is that they are up to the full to the max, to the rafters, as we say, and there is no capacity for growth of the collection. Another one in the US I want to pick is at another university. It's the Phillips Exeter Academy Library in New Hampshire, and it looks like a simple brick cube on the outside, almost boring. It's by Louis Kahn. Sometimes the architecture is very minimal on the outside, but the amazing thing is when you go inside, what you can discover. You can discover, I call it the onion rings in plan and section. You see there's a pink area along the windows where all the reading happens. Then there is a rather dark storage area, and then there is a central atrium like we saw in the Baltimore Library earlier. And this is the view up to the skylight where you have a totally controlled condition of daylight, and everything is raised up above a public square. So you see here more in details how this principle works of these 3 onion rings, the layers of the plan. Each is a distinctive area, the central atrium in blue, the darker book storage, and then the surrounding ring of desks along the windows for daylight. And here we have the reading areas, and you see how the materiality is also very interesting in concrete, and then the shell, and then there is the interior fit out in beautiful teak timber. And you see here more images. And what's so interesting is Kahn said, reading is a private activity, and he wanted those desks you see here in the middle and on the right to be very beautifully smaller alcove areas where you can sit down and you can adjust individually on your own a wooden sliding shutter to control the amount of daylight that would fall onto the page. And you have a very high quality user experience because individually you can adjust the condition to your perfect liking, how you like to have the daylight or how much daylight you like to have. And so this is very beautifully designed. Many things to talk about this library, many innovations in there, but just to introduce you to this, many of you will know. And of course, we have to mention at that point, the library is so much more than just a container to store books, especially today. It's a social space, but we are lacking a theory of the social role of the public library. Some people are working on it. Jeffrey Rifkin has worked on the commodification of public space, but also there is an interesting book I just want to mention to you. It's not by me, it's by somebody else, but it's published, it's edited by Bushman and Leakey. It's called A Critical Theory for Library and Information Science. Many of you will know this book, and it has very important authors from Roland Barthes to Michel Foucault, to Umberto Eco again, to Richard Sennett, Jürgen Habermas, and so on, all writing about the social importance and role of the library for democratic empowerment of their user. So coming back to the webinar, I want to talk to part 2, emerging design trends. What have we learned? We have learned quite a lot from history, which might inform what the library of the present and the future might look like. And here I look at some more recently built libraries and how we can see how there is a revival of the grand reading room. The reading room is coming back, and the relationship between the reading room, the user, and the book storage is crucial, is critical, and it has a revival as a direct relationship where you can see books, where you can directly access books from the reading room, something we lost earlier with Della Santa, now has come back. We also see other innovations. We also see very characterful large interior spaces where the architects sometimes go over the top and where it's more about the architecture and less about the functionality of the library. This also happens, unfortunately, but we also see very good functional solutions where daylight is used in different ways to control glare. You don't want to have glare on the computer screen, and also how the collection, storage, and bookshelves are solved. And there comes the automated storage retrieval system as an innovation, the last 10 years gaining a lot of popularity. The idea here is to put all the books together underground, not all, sorry, 70%, 80% that are not so frequently needed, asked for, and have the most popular 20, 30% of the collection directly accessible in the bookshelf, and have the other books that are less frequently asked for or used in an automated storage and retrieval system for low demand activities. And they can be in high density automated robotic system that looks like this. And we see this, of course, a general trend, more and more technology integration. The technology that is coming, that has already arrived, one of it, automated storage retrieval system, and also automatic checkout, self-checkout of the user. We see how this is adapted more and more. Here we see, for instance, James Hunt Library in North Carolina, where you see the pink part is the automated retrieval system. And the argument here of the librarian and the architect, Snohetta, was that this allows us a highly effective cost and space-saving measure that reduces the overall budget floor needed to store the books, and it allows to use the same budget more allocated towards learning spaces, maker spaces, meeting places, and technology. So that's interesting. That's a trend. That's something to consider if you are planning a large new library. We also see automated machine handling system of case for the return of the books and checkout stations. It's the kind of standard integrated technologies you all will know very well and which have already been introduced to your libraries. Now, in the recent 2000s, we see some wonderful examples. I just want to fly through because it would be wrong not to mention them because they're so important. We see the Mediathek. The Mediathek is a new hybrid typology that is more than just books. It's, of course, using all types of digital media. And let's just look at those genre-bending, new emerging libraries that are setting a new paradigm of sustainable, resource-efficient hybrid libraries. And here are 12. The Bibliothek Alexandria, very important, and we don't have much time to talk about, but it has reading platforms inside, very monumental, very beautiful. TU Delft, very important library by Meccano with a perforated roof, but it's not 55 cones anymore. It's one gigantic cone, as you see here at the bottom, and a wall of books on the back. You see in the photo on the right where this book wall. Another one is very important, is a very sustainable, energy efficient, resourceful library by Foster and Partners, a super green library called The Brain in Berlin, which has a steel frame, very interesting membrane system that brings in filtered daylight, but also a lot of fresh air. Very interesting library, could talk more about. And also here in the US in Phoenix, not far from where I'm located, the Burton Barr Library by Will Bruder, very interesting factory, a warehouse of knowledge. The problem Will Bruder, he had almost no budget to build a huge library of 26,000 square meters. And so he came up with a factory industrial design using industrial components, off-the-shelf steel profiles and so on. So he brought down the cost of the library and he could deliver the huge Phoenix Central Library at a ridiculously low budget. And he came up with a beautiful library that is dealing very beautifully with the excessive sunshine in Phoenix. But also what's interesting is the top floor is the grand reading room, as you can see on the right image, and it has a very high ceiling, floor to ceiling height, and it can accommodate 320 readers at the same time, sitting on long benches. We saw that before, on long tables. That's a very classical idea, and you see the perforation of the roof. Many of those ideas we looked at earlier are coming back here in this beautiful example of a library. Also, a very important milestone, it would be wrong not to mention, is by Toyo Ito in Japan, the Mediathek, which is a very interesting non-hierarchical library. He didn't want to have a hierarchy. He tried to establish a non-hierarchical spatial continuity, an idea that Toyo Ito is obsessed with for many, many years, but also the Mediathek emerging, not a library, the Bibliothek, but the Mediathek embracing all forms of media beyond the book, also movies, videos, music, and so on, and a very interesting structural system for this new type of hybrid library. More of Toyo Ito here, a more recent library he just built in Gifu, which has an interesting, again, a new structure. It's in timber, and there's a huge comeback using timber, using wood, because it's a fast regrowing resource, as you know, and also wood can absorb and store carbon as it grows. In fact, it does absorb carbon and it's embedded in the structure. So there is a reason why architects are very interested in building lightweight, using timber, using wooden buildings. And we can talk more about this also. An important library that was kind of groundbreaking. Paul Goldberger, very important critic in the New York Times, called it the most important public building in the US for the last 50 years. It's certainly a very important building. It's in Seattle Central Library by OMA, who are also very active in the Arab region, of course. And it also presents all forms of media in a new way on a book spiral. You see in section and in plan. It has a lot of innovations here, a remarkable civic public space that is used and loved by many people that go there to read their emails. They use it as their home office, not just to read books. Some a couple of more images. Very interesting, remarkable library. I recommend you. With a diversity of different reading rooms, all different character. One of the most important new libraries in South America is in Mexico City, in middle South America. It's the Vasconcelos Public Library by Kalash. And it's one mega library. The idea was to build 5 libraries, but he suggested to put them all together in one super mega library, which is 250-meter long, and where the bookshelves are suspended from the steel superstructure, and it has this long continuous atrium, and all libraries are lined up along an axis with very interesting ideas here, how reading happens along the windows. You see at the right top, there are all these window bays looking out in a botanical garden. The view is very important. What do you look at? What are you looking at when you look out of the window? And that's why the outdoor spaces are becoming increasingly important, with gardens, a library within a garden. Here, a botanical garden is, of course, a very beautiful romantic idea. A Rolex Learning Center, much more than just a traditional library, a milestone again for innovation. It's organized all on one floor, and it's all a continuous space that is ondulated like a carpet, like a landscape, and it's blurring indoor, outdoor in a very interesting way. So we see a lot of innovation from the architecture side here, and apparently it is always praised for the functionality of its function, the way this library is organized. A lot of people were skeptical about this building first, but I must say, having been there, it works very well, surprisingly well, and it's very pleasant to be there. A smaller library in my hometown in Stuttgart in South Germany, where I grew up, done by a Korean architect Yi, very interesting cube with upside down pyramid inside. You see here the upside down pyramid, and how it is organizing the circulation, the staircases, that people can walk around and go access floor to floor, with a cafe at the top. And again, a central courtyard that is filtering the daylight. Recent library just recently finished by Stephen Hall in New York, in Queens, which has a lot of intimate reading areas, very small. In fact, only 2,200 square meter, but very exquisitely done. There's one problem that emerged here. There was much critique. Also, there were articles in different newspapers, because the elevator does not reach every floor. And so they have to now put a second elevator in there. And also, the stairs are too steep, and they were vilified as too dangerous. So there were different mixed feelings about this small library. I believe it's a beautiful object. Here the architect has come up with a beautiful solution. But of course, if you have the problem that wheelchair users on wheelchair cannot reach every floor, every corner of the library as a public civic building, it is a problem. I think, and Stephen Hall is quoted here. I asked him about a quote. He gave a statement. He said, it is about the problem that we have a continuous information overload, and the love of books. He says there should be a select quality of books that is directly accessible. And he quotes Jorge Luis Borges' beautiful novel, The Library of Babel. Some of you might have read, which talks about the library. And then, of course, new libraries that have been done in China, quite groundbreaking libraries. Here we see the Tianjin BI library, where we have terraced bookshelves inside, and its architect Winnie Maas says it's all about being Instagrammable. You want the library to be an intensification. And his quote, he says, our libraries will become hangout destinations, and our hangout spots will become libraries. So clearly, what can we learn? The 21st century public space is the library. The library is the public space of the future. And we see this already in 3 spectacular libraries that have been built in Riyadh, Doha, and Sharjah. You all know them, of course. King Fahd National Library, beautiful design, very, very big library of 87,000 square meter, with a fantastic sun shading, facade technology solution, how to keep out the strong UV light in Riyadh. Another one is Qatar National Library in Doha by OMA, and House of Wisdom in Sharjah that was recently built. Very beautiful libraries that I visited. I was fortunate. 2 new libraries in China that reimagine what a library can do. One is under construction in Wuhan, and it established a canyon of books, again by MVRDV. You see how this idea of the book canyon is picking up, not just MBRDV, but it seems to be in the air. A lot of architects are designing canyons of books for libraries at the moment. Very non-traditional, but very interesting. And this one has just opened in Beijing City Library, the world's largest library reading space ever. And it's again a canyon of books, as you can see, with a very interesting solution for a perforated roof that filters the daylight. A couple of trends we see also here is the adaptive reuse, urban regeneration, repurposing existing factory buildings, for instance, or water reservoirs, or palaces, or even a temple or a church that is here a former hospital and a former glass factory. So we see all around the world architects being inventive in repurposing buildings. That is, of course, a very sustainable way to do it. So to sum up, to come to the end of the webinar, the continuous development of the building type and how it expresses shared values. We see mediatheks combining analog with digital. We see new types of public space, like the book canyon, very radical ways, but blurring inside, outside with gardens and courtyards. We see the center of lifelong learning that the library has become as a real community asset for meetings, courses, exhibitions. We see also the library as a flexible warehouse adapting new typology. And here is a quote by library historian Ken Walpole, who says, in an increasingly commercialized urban world, urban center, the public library acts as a beacon of civility and will be increasingly valued as such. And it's very interesting how the library plays a role in urban regeneration. So what are the characteristics of the library of the future, the next generation library? It will have less high shelving. It will have more technology. It will have plenty of daylight. Daylight is very important. It is coming back. It is, of course, controllable, but daylight plays a major role. But also it will have a close relationship between the reader and the collection of books, and we'll have many more things than just books, movies, music. It will be very technology driven, but also architectural driven. Successful libraries need good architecture, otherwise they're not gonna be popular. And also it will be very user-friendly. It will have automated storage systems, a solution that is gaining popularity for very large growing collections, but also technology is constantly changing. It will not stop. We also see exterior public spaces becoming more important, like the entry courtyard, the public space, like we see at Seattle Central Library, and public roof gardens and roof cafes and green walls are just must-have features against the banality. So here are my top 5 trends. Light and airy open spaces for new and existing libraries, more natural daylight, more views to the outside, into the garden, sunken courtyards, but also control of glare, flow of interior space, very important, not boxed up, separate rooms, but a flow, a continuous flow of open plan with full height interior walls or lower shelving, but also color plays a major role to designate certain areas. Second, the flexibility and adaptability. Adaptability is key. The flexibility of the library from collection-centric to people-centric, service-centric community center with a lot of spaces for special collections and archives. And we see also the focus on user engagement, very important, critical. The library as a learning hub, using integrated technology despite budget constraints and different community demands. We see that 3D printing facilities and maker spaces have entered the library, consumer-like experiences where service is very important for its users. They want the information immediately. They want it now, and they want it everywhere where they are, wherever they are in the library. This is the new consumer-like experience that users are expecting in the library. And it brings together the best of the physical and the digital to create those learning hubs. But also the library, not as a sacred temple with the threshold, but as a destination and a meeting place for everyone. It is really a social condenser. It is open for an inclusive society where anybody can go and learn and whatever they want to do there and meet. It's a meeting place with fast access to the world of information. The user wants instant gratification, and it needs to be knowledge that is enjoyable. The entertainment effect of learning is becoming very important, and also a shared immersive experience. The roof is usually transformed to public roof gardens and blurring the boundary between the public and the private. And my last important point would be a super green, energy efficient library for social placemaking. The libraries will continue evolving and changing. We do not reach a point where that is the ultimate ideal library. There are many solutions, many different solutions happening, but also it will keep evolving, especially with the renewal of urban fabric, the catalyst of urban regeneration. The super green library will often be an adaptive reuse project that is reusing an existing structure. I believe more libraries will build in engineered mass timber wood construction that reduces the embodied carbon of the construction, and we see a non-hierarchical free flow in the plan of the spaces, very important. So we have developed in my office a 6-point program where we work on with different libraries at the moment in the US and in Europe. An urban timber structure, usually 3, 4, 5-story, lightweight with low embodied carbon, is very, very popular and important to implement at the moment, but also a social encounter with a public plaza that connects the front square with the public lobby inside. And this is usually where you have a cafe with different opening times, but also generating renewable energy. We have libraries that produce all the energy they need, at least 50% on site, solar powered surplus that generates and stores with battery backup more energy than the library consumes, with a modular flexibility using modular prefabrication for entire building components and the principles for design for disassembly. So in 20, 30 years, as user needs will have changed for sure. You can have a flexible design for disassembly that is adaptable for future needs. You can change the library, but you also avoid waste. You don't have to destroy the building part. You can adapt the building part to those new requirements, functional requests, which we don't know yet today, but also integrating vegetation and cooling, very important to counteract the urban heat island effect, and integrating green walls, green roofs, green components into the entrance lobby, the nature component. People want to be connected to nature. Very important, especially today. We spend over 90% indoors, and we have such a huge disconnect from nature, spending too much time on the screen, of course. And last not least, maximizing daylight and controlling glare, where a lot of amount of thinking, innovation, and the budget goes with. You want to have maximum natural daylight, but you want to reduce the amount of artificial lighting and glare and UV light. So it sounds like a contradiction. How do you do that? You filter the light. You have to come up with effective facade control systems to avoid overheating. Also very important that you do not have to cool down all the energy, cooling energy. So this is my big picture run through, looking at the history of the typology, how it evolved over the last thousands of years, and what has happened this century, especially looking at 20 important libraries of the last years. We recently see a lot of interest again in the library. The Washington Post editorial just had a big piece about the library. They call it the golden age of public libraries. And this is very interesting because some libraries have become so important community anchors for each towns, and there is more to read. And I know there is, we're going to have a podcast. I know this is recorded, I understand. So you're going to be able to access this later. If I went through the slides, some of the slides too fast, there is also a list of further reading and references. You might like to dig in deeper into the library needs more references. Another plug on my book, I recommend you. and also library websites. Visit the Special Library Association Arabian Gulf chapter website. There is a lot here, but there's also another webinar I did for Bibliotheca. There is a recent article I published and a recent interview I published on the library of the future, photo credits, and also finishing off with a last quote by Mark Twain: in a good book room, you feel in some mysterious way that you are absorbing the wisdom contained in all the books through your skin without even opening those books, which I think is a wonderful quote for us to stop on today. Thank you for your attention and for listening to a lot of information. I hope it was digestible. And I hand back to Professor Hassan Al-Sharei.
Thank you, Dr. Lehmann. Honestly, it is very informative journey with the libraries since years. I'm glad that we have different people from different backgrounds here, but I'll start. Just give me 1 or 2 minutes just to give an Arabic summary of what we listened to. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. في الدكتور ليمان وهو صاحب كتاب يعني اللي هو تصور، إعادة تصور لمكتبة المستقبل. هو خلفيته في الهندسة وتصميم المباني، وهو ترى شخصية معروفة دوليا في قضايا استدامة المدن واستدامة المباني، فجاء من الخلفية. أخذنا اليوم في رحلة طويلة من بداية تصميم المكتبات والأفكار المعمارية في تصميم المباني، فبدأ من بداية يعني العشرينات في القرن العشرين واستمر إلين التطور، وجاب حقيقة النماذج متنوعة. لكن هو في الأخير في ال4 سلايدات الأخيرة حط المعايير. طبعا هو أذن لنا أننا إحنا نضع هذه المحاضرة وننشرها، فحتكون موجودة، وأنصح اللي يرجع لها يرجع لل5 6 العناصر اللي في الأخير ذكرها. ففي البداية ويمكن أكثر من يعني جزء كبير من المحاضرة كان عن نماذج لمكتبات متنوعة، وخاصة المكتبات العامة. وهو قال المكتبة العامة ستظل عامة وستظل مجانية لسبب، طبعا احنا هناك في آراء كثير اللي هي فكرة المواطنة وحقوق المواطنة وإتاحة المكتبات والمتاحف للمواطن والمقيم. طبعا هو أشار لنماذج، ومنها نماذج عربية زي مكتبة اسكندرية، وأشار لمكتبة في الإمارات والسعودية. لكن أنا أعتقد هو يقصد المكتبة التي تديرها الأستاذة مروة العقروبي، اللي هي مكتبة بيت الحكمة. والعناصر اللي ذكرها دكتور ليمان في الأخير اللي هو ركز على أنه المكتبة كملخص فقط، اللي هي المكتبة المرنة، المكتبة الحركية، المكتبة الخضراء، المكتبة اللي تهتم بالإضاءة الطبيعية، تهتم بقضايا إنه تكون تهتم يعني مركزة على المستفيد وبيئة العمل. فكان يتحدث بطريقة حقيقة ركزها في الأخير في المعايير اللي هي مباني المكتبات في المستقبل، ويعني ببساطة مريحة، مرحبة، مرنة، مكتبات خضراء. احنا عندنا يعني انا بس بحاول انه يعني اختصر الوقت وحرجع للغة الإنجليزية. Thank you, Dr. Lehmann, and we are honored here to have some members. I want to welcome everybody. يعني I looked at the names of the people who are attending, and I want to thank everyone who is attending from all the area حقيقة. And I will start with someone from my home city. who's relating to me in my city, and also relating to Steffen from their background. He's the Professor Muhammad Al-Hussein. He's a professor of architecture. He's not in the library business, but he's in the heritage. He's a well-known scholar in Al Medina and King Saud University. I invited him, and Dr. Muhammad will start with you, and then شكرا دكتور محمد. تفضل.
شكرا دكتور حسن، تسمعني؟ السلام
أيوة
عليكم.
أيوة نسمعك، تفضل.
Thank you, Professor Lehmann. It's really a good presentation and lecture, and I benefited a lot, like reading several books about libraries. I mean, its design, its spaces, its shapes. I enjoyed really this lecture, and it is really good that you highlighted the library design in the future, and you presented some suggestions and changes for especially daylight and more attraction of interior spaces and outdoor spaces. And all these are very important, and it will attract people. The most also important is the social activity. We have to increase the social activities in the libraries to attract especially new generations, young generations, because I expect in near future that new generations will not be attracted to libraries, especially if it is continue as it is. Another side of the question, do you have any suggestions about the existing libraries, especially university libraries? I mean, they are very important, and they include thousands and millions of books, but they are not also attracted. And if you have any suggestions to develop and make it more attractive. Thank you very much.
Shukran. Thank you, our
Thank you,
eminent
Professor Muhammad. Dr. Steffen, can you take notes? So we'll listen to them, and then at the end, I will give you the closing time, so you can comment until you say we'll stop right there.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
As
you,
you
Professor
prefer.
Muhammad Al-Hussein.
العفو.
We'll listen to the president of the Arab Federation of Libraries and Information, and also the dean of the College of Arts, I think, at Sultan Qaboos, the Dr. Nabhan Al-Harasi. Welcome. تفضل دكتور.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Special Library Association Gulf Chapter for organizing this webinar, and many thanks for Professor Steffen for this an excellent presentation and well-documented information. I would like to thank him for the historical overview of the library design. I may ask about the green building, which now the approach of all countries to protect the environment. My question is the difference between many terms that used sometimes to describe the green building. For example, eco-friendly building, sometimes user-friendly buildings, and also smart buildings, work-friendly buildings. My question, are all have the same meaning? And also, are all concerned with minimizing environmental impact, or there other things must be concerned? This is the question, and many thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Nabhan, and I really appreciate your participation. I know you are traveling and very busy, but Nabhan is one of the very important people in the Special Library Association Arabian Gulf. He used to be a president of the SLA Arabian Gulf chapter, and he's very active. Now he's serving the Arab Federation of Libraries and Information. I wish him the best. We'll go now with the Vice President of the Egyptian Library Association and the head of the Library and Information Science Department at Helwan University, Professor Imad Saleh. Professor Imad, تفضل.
Thanks, Dr. Hassan. First of all, I want to thank Professor Steffen for the insightful presentation. I have two questions for him. The first one is, in the context of digital era, did we really need to build architecture masterpiece which wouldn't be in use? Or there is a more need to adapt a flexible model for justify spaces according to user actual needs and reflect the need of concept for the library as a social hub. As you may know, our library, most of our libraries, not built to be dedicated to a library. It was repurposed for to work as a library. The second question is regarding the user experience. How to modeling the user experience as an architect, and how to model the tools you use to model the user journey during the use of our buildings. Thanks, Dr. Hassan.
Thank you, Professor Imad. And I want to thank John, the president of the Special Library Association. We are very honored to have you today, and I want to thank you for opening this webinar. And it's always, this is the beginning, but it will not be the end. And I will give you I know that you are busy, you have a busy schedule and you want to leave. We'll give you 1 minute if you want to say something, and we'll give you time if you want to leave. If you want to stay, then I'll give you time at the end. It's up to you. But I just want to forward my personal thanks and sincere thanks from the whole community in the Special Library Association Arabian Gulf chapter to you in joining us. And please, if you want to say something, or we'll.
Sure, I'm just happy to say thank you again for having me today. This was fantastic, very inspirational, Dr. Lehmann. Thank you so much for presenting today. But again, thank you to the Arabian Gulf community for having me. To you, Professor Hassan, shukran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We say afwan in Arabic, so thank you, and we'll see you, inshallah. We'll go to Dr. Nashrawan Taha, the head of the Library and Information Science Department at Jordan University. Dr. Nashrawan, please.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for this very important and useful webinar. And thank you, Professor Lehmann, for such a wonderful and interesting information about the evolving typology of libraries. My question is about AI, and how do you think AI will impact on library design? And do you think with the availability of AI now, with the generative AI, can we still have the space as a place for social and for everyone to be part of it. Because as one of the speakers has mentioned, the young generation, I'm not sure how young generation will be involved in library activities during or with the availability of the AI at this era. So this is my question, and thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this event. Thank you.
شكرا دكتور نشروان. And we'll end with Professor Aman Sayed. She's a member of the scientific committee at the Special Library Association, and also she used to be a head of the department at Helwan University. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she is the vice dean of the college, and she is very active. أماني تفضلي.
السلام عليكم. شكرا دكتور حسن. Thank you, Professor Steffen, for the amazing lecture, and many thanks to Professor Hassan for this topic. My question is about how can library buildings contribute to SDG 11 by engagement with other heritage institutions like archives and special museums. Professor Steffen, are you agree that some old library buildings are themselves considered heritage sites? Thank you.
شكرا Professor Amani. I think we'll end. But I see Abdul Basit Makki, and also most of the questions in the question and answer were risen by the professors and doctors. عبد الباسط مكي افتح الصوت إذا سمحت. عبد الباسط عرف بنفسك.
السلام عليكم. This is Abdul Basit Makki from Ankara University, PhD student of the library science.
أهلا وسهلا. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I want to just ask about the question of the architecture of library. As we said, the library is constructing with users. So how can users participate or contribute in the architecture of the new library or the green library? That's my question.
شكرا. Thank you, Abdul Basit.
Yeah.
From Ankara. So we are now have people from outside the Gulf area, from the outside the Arab world. Thank you, Abdul Basit. Dr. Lehmann, the mic is yours, and you have the time, please.
Thank you, Shukran. Thank you, everybody. You had a lot of excellent questions. I wish I would know the answers. Now, look, let me try. First, I want to say we just scratched the surface today. You know, I'm happy to come back with the second webinar that looks more into the detail of the organization of what to avoid, what to do, and what not to do. Because I realized a long time ago, librarians need to make decisions how to keep their library alive and adjust to the new trends. And it's very difficult. They're struggling often to decide and to make these decisions because of a lack of knowledge and not enough time and not given proper information. And they are pushed into a position that they have to decide now what they want to do, A or B. But maybe it's not A or B, maybe it's C or D or E. So sometimes the solution is not so obvious. So first of all, I think it's very important to understand, we need to understand and know the history of the libraries, where it's coming from. And of course, this should be, the important libraries should all be heritage protected buildings, as to answer Professor Al-Zayed's question. But and this is, of course, all part of preservation of the library. And we know we have here a wonderful group online of all people that know libraries very well and love libraries. and the books, but also are wondering what will be the next library of the future. And it's very important for all existing libraries that they need to keep evolving. You can never stand still. You always need to extend or bring in new programs, think about how AI will impact and so on. So it's also, I want to say, it's not just about building new buildings. It's also about renovating and upgrading existing libraries, which is a huge market. And we are very interested. We are working now on several libraries worldwide where we help to make those plans and develop existing libraries. Very, very rare. It's new libraries built from scratch. It's most of the time, it's how can we modernize and extend an existing library that can better cater with the changing needs that have changed. So, and sorry, I don't speak Arabic, but I know you, and Professor Hassan made a wonderful summary of one of the things I said, and you all had great questions that will be difficult to answer all fairly. But let's come to the question of AI, which I saw several people are concerned and have put into the chat. How will AI impact and what will it mean? And of course, how can AI be useful to you? Not just a gadget to have, and because it's a fashion, machine learning, artificial intelligence, something everybody wants now. It's also how can it be useful and help you on your daily work in the library. It will impact, I think it mainly will impact collection development, and user engagement and library services. This is where AI will have a significant impact on those areas. It will even create disruption if we are not prepared. So also it will help you with marketing tools to do better marketing of the service, but we still will need buildings in future. So buildings will not go away, but what happens inside and how we prepare for this disruption of AI will be critical. And I think it will be very important. It depends on case to case. There is no one silver bullet. I found that we're working with different libraries and each case is unique and different. You know, a library in a European city is very different from here in the US, for instance. So I'm also thinking of all those great 19th century libraries, such as we looked at the New York Public Library, the British Museum Reading Room, and so on. And they come to mind and what we can learn from what has worked in history. You know, it's interesting. History, it's so much to learn for us. It's not something closed and forget about, and now it's all different. Actually, we are part of history. We are making history now, and we are part of this line of temporary line of what we're doing today. Is very much part of tomorrow's history. I want to say that in terms of sustainability, I'm an architect who has been working on sustainability for 30 years, long time before it became fashionable. I did sustainable buildings in Berlin that are still examples of the most energy efficient buildings. And you have to be aware of greenwashing. A lot of people, advisors, consultants will come with all kinds of ideas, and you have to really be careful with greenwashing, and they call it smart. Of course, nobody wants to have a stupid building. Everybody wants to have a smart building, but it's not necessary. It's just a word, you know, it's just a smart building. Maybe it's not so smart. We have to look more in detail. And again, it depends on case by case, but sustainability has to be integrated in everything from the beginning, you know. And it's very, very important. You want to have also the user needs. You want to have make sure this is very, very important. User engagement and user needs is top on my list. Every library we work on, because you don't want to have a white elephant. We call it white elephant. It's a big building that has cost millions and millions of dollars, but it doesn't work well. And it's a kind of monument to the architect or to the politician, but it's not working well. So we have to definitely avoid this and understand what will be tomorrow's user needs and how do we integrate user engagement, facilitate user engagement, and be inclusive, and also do the right things. For instance, sustainability. A lot of things are called now green or sustainable or smart. But again, as I said, greenwashing, you have to be aware. What's very, very important is low embodied carbon and low operating carbon. These are two different things you might know. Low embodied carbon means all the materials, all the construction system, which I don't expect librarians to know much about. It is really a special field. And my research institute does a lot of research on low embodied carbon. Where do the materials come from? How can the building be recycled? How do we avoid waste? How do we have the most cost-effective solution for the materials? And does it need to be steel, or can it be timber, wood, or can it be concrete? How does wood perform in a hot climate, in a desert city? We are here, I'm talking to you from Las Vegas, which is a desert city. We have a very hot day outside today. It's here 10 a.m. in the morning. It's getting very hot. So low embodied carbon is very important, but also not have glass glazing exposed to sun unnecessarily, very large glazing surfaces where you need to then work hard to keep the cooling down so the building doesn't overheat. That's very important, so you don't waste energy, but also operating carbon. And what kind of materials you select, all this is part of designing a good public library. And I don't want to just think of a library as an indoor space. The library is very much also outdoor spaces. One library in Poland we are designing at the moment has a lot of outdoor reading spaces. And you can do this, of course, if you have a lot of shade. The most important in the Arab region is shade, creating shade and control overheating. This is probably the most important. It has always, for thousands of years, people living in desert cities, in Riyadh, in Jeddah, you know, where you get, or in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and other places where you have extreme temperatures. The most important is to create shade on the outside, but also shade for the windows, for the glazing, to avoid overheating and to avoid strong UV light entering the building and hitting the precious books and destroying the books or the manuscripts, but also avoiding glare. So how do you deal with glare, not to have glare on the screen of the computers? And how do you have your shading device, your facade technology, sun shading control that needs to go far beyond what usually happens in, let's say, in a city like London or Paris or New York, where you don't have this extreme situation of a desert city. So you need desert cities have different needs, different constraints, but also different opportunities. Of course, you can use the unlimited power of the sun to generate solar power. In Riyadh, for instance, you could run an entire library just from the sun if you have a good battery backup system that is storing the energy, the solar power generated. So you can even have a building that generates more energy. It's like a power station, generates more energy than it consumes by itself, you know. So those things are technically possible, and we have done those, and I would be very happy to help anybody who is online who wants us to engage, to help for advice and to look at your project if we can be helpful. Most important is to avoid some early mistakes that you cannot undo later, and that would be very costly to solve later. So because at the beginning, the librarians are put in the position that you have to make decisions and you have to decide this or that. But you know, you must rely on good advisors and good consultants to make sure you're not entering a cost spiral unnecessarily that costs you all your budget later and would not have been necessary but avoidable. So architecture, of course, today needs a lot of expertise in low carbon, low operating, low embodied carbon, and all the sustainability questions that are to be integrated from the first thinking. But also, as I repeat myself, the user needs, the user engagement is absolutely important. How do you create public space? The library, I see the library as an indoor public space, the way you connect with the outdoor, despite a very hot climate you are having, a lot of sun. How do you create shade and comfort, thermal comfort in being outside, that you also can have outdoor reading areas and roof gardens and all those things that are so important for the library of the future, integrating cooling and nature component, how you bring native desert planting into the gardens, into the library, and on top of the roof of the library. The nature component, I believe, is very, very important. The children come to the library and learn about nature and the different plant species. The library today can be much more. It can almost be like a botanical garden. It can be like a learning school. It can do so many things. And for lifelong learning, even we old ones can go there and learn maybe languages or improve our computer skills. Very important, those training rooms and schooling meeting rooms that are part of every library program today. So I hope I answered some of your questions. Of course, some of you have asked questions that would open up another discussion for another 2 hours, which we don't have. But it was a great pleasure to meet you all. And again, thank you so much to the Special Library Association Gulf chapter, but also Professor Hassan Al-Sarehi and Dr. John and everybody who came to listen today to our meeting. And we should probably have in 6 months a second meeting where we talk about, where we follow up and build up on what we learned and look at other more detailed aspects. Because today, I think today we just scratched the surface of the library of the future and what to do and what not to do. And again, it's not just about building big new libraries, flashy, fancy new libraries. It must be about regenerating, renewing the existing library, which most of the time we're struggling with libraries that have been 30, 40, 50 years old, and they are very energy hungry, unsustainable, but also they cannot engage the user in the way we would like to. And the way we do today, so much has happened in library design, and the needs for user engagement and the user needs are completely different, and it will keep evolving. So there is a strong case for looking at buildings from the 60s, 70s, 80s that are now 40, 50 years old that need to be renewed. And this is one major part of our work, updating, regenerating, and making those tired-looking libraries that are not working well anymore and upgrade them to be top-notch as if it would be a new building. Sometimes we did a library, people came and said, oh, this is not a new building. We thought it's a new building. Because, if you do it well, people think it's a new built library and it's solving all those problems so well. So again, thank you so much for listening in. We had a big group today of over 100 experts on libraries. And I find libraries are not just the most public of all public buildings, but it's just wonderful to think about the relationship between the user and the books and the needs and the reading areas and shading and how you move the circulation, how you organize. And the new program to be future-proof, the library that you build now needs to be future-proof for 20 years at least. So you need to foresee the impact of things like AI, of course, and machine learning, and also your ever-growing collection. Your collection will never stop growing. So what do you do? There are different ways you can go, and this is a big decision you have to make at some point. You keep expanding and putting more and more shelving that is not nice for your space, or how do you do that? And so a lot more to talk about. And thank you again for all your time and listening in today. And I wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dr. Lehmann. And I want to thank you twice. Once for the wonderful presentation, and the second one for the comments and your talk after you listen to the questions. It's another informative lecture about different aspects, and we will follow on those issues you suggested. After 6 months, we'll take another issue. And you remind me about the Saudi Library Commission, started 2 years or 3 years ago, and they have a plan, a strategic plan. And one of the aspects that they are working on that issue is re-innovating some of their libraries. And I send them an invitation. I don't know if some of the whether people are here or not. But at
We would
least
be
I
very,
know.
we would be very happy to work with the Saudi Library Commission. We also work with the Royal Commission in Riyadh City, RCRC already, and we would be very happy to look specifically at the library, and we could do this, on a pro bono basis to get started.
I invited some of them and I sent them the invitation. And also, I'm glad that some of the library directors are attending, and some of the academic figures are here. I don't want to miss anyone, but I want to thank all of you. Dr. Hamoud, Dr. Hassan Mu'mini, Dr. Majid, our beloved Professor Faiga, Farah, and also the librarians, the students, PhD students. Dr. Walid Ghazawi is here. He will be our next speaker and the next webinar speaker, which is coming very soon. We'll announce about it. And he's in the area of knowledge management and the supply chain issues. We'll touch on those issues, inshallah, very soon. I just want to end up with thank you so much, Dr. Steffen Lehmann. We are very happy and honored to have you. This is the beginning, but at least our friendship will continue, and I hope to see you in person here in Jeddah, and you will love the city of Jeddah. Or if you go to Muscat, you will love the Muscat. By the way, the area around Las Vegas is not is close to the area of Muscat. The Jeddah, when you go to Al Medina, because I drove in Las Vegas and I know our cities, it's similar, almost similar, mountains and not so much green. So it's there. Thank you so much, and thank you for everybody for attending. And with this, I conclude. We reach, by the way, 135 people attending, and it's usually tough to have people staying until the end, but it seems like everybody likes the webinar. And I want to thank everyone attending this. Thank you, Dr. Hamad, and the group of the people who are working with the registration and everybody. Have a good night, and for you, Dr. Lehmann, have a good day, and we'll see you soon, inshallah. Thank you so much. Goodbye.